Tonight, a special edition of the CBS Evening News from the Democratic National Convention. What we're learning about President Biden's speech as he aims to pass the torch to his vice president, less than a month after shaking up the race for the White House. Chicago prepares for thousands of protesters as Americans react to the Harris campaign, now narrowly leading in new polls.
I think that the Democrats should have to earn our votes.
We have to now look forward. The energy is here.
Plus, our exclusive interview with former President Donald Trump. The CBS Evening News from Chicago starts now. The Windy City is abuzz for a historic week here in Chicago. Good evening. I'm Nora O'Donnell, and thank you for being with us as the Democratic National Convention gets underway. Former and future leaders of the party are here to honor the past, but celebrate the future, following one of Harris's campaign slogans, "We're not going back." Now, tonight is about the current president, Joe Biden. The party is expected to say thank you and honor his legacy less than a month after he dropped out of the race. In just hours, Joe Biden will give tonight's keynote address. Former President Donald Trump is hoping to draw attention away from right here at the DNC with a rally in Pennsylvania. And CBS News spoke with Trump this afternoon in an exclusive interview, so we'll have some of that for you in just a moment. But there's breaking news with riot police outside the United Center after pro-Palestinian protesters broke through security barriers right here at the convention. We have team coverage of the convention, and CBS's Ed O'Keefe will start us off.
Day one of the Democratic National Convention brought long lines and thousands of energized delegates ready to kick off a historic week.
We can hardly contain ourselves. I can hardly contain myself.
What I'm looking for now is the world's biggest pep rally.
Kamala Harris's campaign is riding a wave of momentum into this lakeside city, with a new CBS News poll showing the vice president with a 3-point edge nationally and leveling the playing field in key battleground states, though she's trying to temper expectations.
I very much consider us the underdog. We have a lot of work to do to earn the vote of the American people.
Harris and her running mate, Minnesota Governor Tim Walz, are fresh off a weekend bus tour across western Pennsylvania, part of the blue wall of swing states Democrats are counting on for victory.
The blue wall is solid, people. The blue wall is solid.
But former President Donald Trump is also zeroing in on the Keystone State, appearing today for the second time since Saturday, as Republicans race to define Harris on their own increasingly harsh terms.
Kamala puts America last. I put America first.
Back in Chicago, thousands of pro-Palestinian protesters, unhappy with the Biden administration's handling of the war in Gaza, marched near the convention site. CBS's Lilia Luciano was there.
Chicago police officers are trained on de-escalation. It's what we are seeing happen here. Dozens and dozens of them in riot gear who showed up to clear this park after protesters breached the security fence that was meant to keep protesters away from where the delegates are.
And inside the arena tonight, a celebration of the outgoing president. Joe Biden and the First Lady scoped out the podium where they'll speak and where he'll pass the torch to Harris. Just under a month ago, President Biden was still the presumptive nominee until his historic decision to withdraw. Many in the hall tonight are among the Democratic leaders who pushed him to go, allowing Harris to quickly consolidate the party. Delaware Senator Chris Coons, a longtime confidant of the president, admits this isn't how it was supposed to end. How hard do you think it is for him to go out this way, knowing that this was all being organized for him originally?
This was his choice. He always was clear-eyed that the most important thing he could do was to make sure that Donald Trump isn't reelected.
Things are just getting underway. Also speaking tonight, former Secretary of State Hillary Rodham Clinton. Her appearance perhaps a cautionary tale and reminder to Democrats. After all, 8 years ago this summer, she was leading or even in national and battleground state polls, only to lose to Trump in November. Nora?
An important point, Ed O'Keefe from the convention floor. Ed, thank you very much. I want to bring in our chief White House correspondent, CBS's Nancy Cordes. And Nancy, this convention was supposed to be Biden's big party, but after tonight, we're not going to hear from the president. Is that a deliberate strategy?
Absolutely, Laura. In fact, it's kind of reminiscent of that tradition where outgoing presidents greet the president-elect on Inauguration Day, but then fly off on Marine One before the new president is sworn in.
You want to give the new president, or in this case, the new nominee, their moment in the sun. You want to give the party the opportunity to rally around her without looking in the rearview mirror. Now, that doesn't mean he's going to be out of sight the next 3 months. President Biden has promised to campaign for Harris, but this is a crucial 4 days for the country to get to know Kamala Harris. And President Biden has decided to keep a low profile after tonight to help facilitate that. Nora?
Nancy Cordes, thank you so much. And as we noted, the contest for the presidency has shifted dramatically in just the last month. Former President Donald Trump is now barely leading in 3 of the 7 battleground states. Now, that's part of the reason he's out on the campaign trail this week, even as this convention is underway. And CBS's Caitlin Huey-Burns spoke to Donald Trump in York, Pennsylvania for an exclusive interview.
I do want to ask about your opponent, Kamala Harris, the vice president. You have criticized her appearance. You've criticized her intelligence. Is that the message to win over those moderate voters that you're going to need in the middle?
No, I don't think so. I think that the message is what a bad job they've done. I mean, if you look at this economy, if you look at inflation, and, you know, I love this country. I have to do what it takes to win.
Why insult her intelligence?
Well, I have to do that. Well, I don't think she's a very bright person. I do feel that. I mean, I think that's right. I think I am a very bright person, and a lot of people say that. I don't think she's a very bright person. And you know what? Our country needs a very smart person. And I don't think she's a very smart person. So I'm not looking to, I don't consider that an insult. That's just a fact.
But what evidence do you have for that?
I looked at the things that she said. I looked at the way she deals. I looked at her record of her crazy record. I look at her policies. I just don't happen to think so. Now,
and just quickly, the polls are tightening. Do you need to change up, shake up your campaign?
No, I think no, I don't think so at all. I mean, I'm leading in most of the swing states, if not all. Look, they did a very bad thing. They took a man who won, and they said, "Get out of here, Joe. This is a coup. And if you don't get out the nice way, we're going to get you out the bad way. Get out of here, Joe." It was a terrible thing they did. And then they put him on Monday night. You know what that's called? That's called like the worst night, okay?
For more analysis on the state of this race, let's bring in CBS News Chief Election and Campaign Correspondent Robert Costa. Really interesting, Robert, to listen to the former president there, because while he admits that he's off message, he's doubling down on it.
And he said in Caitlin's excellent interview that he's not shaking up his campaign, but he has brought back Corey Lewandowski, his campaign manager from 2016. So many of my sources, Nora, inside the Trump campaign say this is just like August 2016. He was on the ropes against Secretary Clinton. Now they say he needs to focus, have a message on the economy, have a message on the border. Don't just make it personal. But as we all know, former President Trump, he likes to mix the personal with the political as he makes his attacks.
All right, Robert Costa, thank you very much. Turning now to the tensions in the Middle East, Secretary of State Antony Blinken says Israel has accepted a proposal to bridge differences that have been holding up a ceasefire and hostage release in Gaza, and he's calling on Hamas to do the same. Tonight, we're reporting from the border between Ukraine and Russia, where the war, nearly 2.5 years in, has entered a historic new phase. That's because Ukraine stunned the Russians earlier this month and now controls an area of Russian territory that is larger than the city of Los Angeles. Ukrainian forces cautiously showed CBS's Ian Lee where they entered Russia, careful not to give up their location. The Ukrainian military reviewed our raw video, but they had no editorial control over this final report.
We traveled down one of the most important roads in Ukraine.
Right now, we're being taken into an exclusion zone where we'll see the point where Ukrainian troops are entering Russia.
Kyiv's military clogs this 2-lane highway. Armored vehicles and supply trucks keep the offensive moving forward. Along the way, we pass ghost towns and a half-built church. Life near Russia has been replaced by the tools of death, and the border crossing bears its scars.
How far is Russia from here? Скільки метрів звідси Russia? 50 meters.
This is as far as we go.
Around 2 weeks ago, Russia was in control of that side of the border. 50 yards down, that's Russian territory. But as you can see from the damage here, Ukrainian forces smashed through this point and they're pushing deeper into the Kursk region.
Ukrainian special forces form the tip of the spear. Speed and aggression, their ally. Heavy armor brings up the rear. Today, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky boasted that his forces have captured nearly 500 square miles, creating a buffer zone to prevent military attacks. Ukraine is also destroying vital Russian bridges, at least 3 so far, making it harder for the Kremlin to send reinforcements. Russian President Vladimir Putin's reputation is on the line, but Moscow isn't taking this offensive lying down. Artillery, missiles, and bombs target Ukrainian troops as well as civilians.
Since we've been here, we've been told that a Russian reconnaissance drone is watching us from the sky.
And that is our cue to leave. Ian Lee, CBS News on the Ukraine-Russia border.
Back here at home, this news: after spending less than a year in Congress, former Representative George Santos is facing more than 6 years in prison. The New York Republican pleaded guilty today to wire fraud and aggravated identity theft in his federal fraud case. Santos was kicked out of Congress last year after being accused of crimes including stealing from political donors and using campaign contributions to pay for personal expenses. Santos owes more than $370,000 in restitution, in addition to the possible prison time. A massive cleanup is underway after flash floods swept through Connecticut and other parts of the Northeast on Sunday. Some areas got up to a foot of rain. At least 2 people were killed. CBS's Nikki Batiste reports tonight from the flood zone.
In Connecticut, hours of nonstop torrential downpours unleashed a trail of deadly destruction, washing away roads and bridges, submerging cars. A flash flood stranded several drivers. This man, an amputee, and his dog were pulled to safety. And there was this precarious rescue involving 19 people trapped inside a restaurant.
We are talking about rainfall in some areas in the 1,000-year level. So it's really historic, unprecedented flooding.
Southwestern Connecticut receives about 4 inches of rain in all of August, but nearly a foot fell in this storm in just a matter of hours.
The water just came rushing over the walls, like it just came out of nowhere.
Kimberly Hallepin has lived in the nearby town of Sandy Hook for 24 years. This was the view of her yard before the storm. And this is how it looked as floodwaters raged. What were you feeling in that moment?
Panic. I just thought the front of my house was going to cave in. Like, I really thought we were going to get washed away, you know?
The storm also caused major damage in New Jersey and on New York's Long Island. Suffolk County especially hard hit. Back in Connecticut, there's now added misery for Kimberly Hallepin.
Do you have flood insurance? No, I don't. And I just got the phone call from our insurance that said they're not going to help us with anything. We're screwed.
Connecticut's governor declared a state of emergency today, which he says he hopes will help bring federal resources here. One of the women who died had escaped her car and was clinging to a road sign as firefighters tried to rescue her, but the water was too strong and she was swept away. Nora?
Thinking of all the victims. Nikki Batiste, thank you so much. Lost at sea, 2 Americans are among the missing after a mega yacht sinks off the coast of Italy. We've got new details coming in. That's next. An intense search is underway off the southern tip of Italy for 2 Americans who are among 6 people missing after a luxury yacht sank in a powerful storm. Officials believe the 183-foot sailboat capsized off Sicily after it was hit by a waterspout. 22 people were on board after it, and at least 1 person died. British tech billionaire Mike Lynch and his 18-year-old daughter are reportedly also among the missing. Eye on America is next. We'll look back at the motivations behind the violent protests of 1968 and 2 men who were at the center of the chaos, why they say this time will be different. As we've been reporting, thousands of demonstrators are in the streets here protesting a number of issues. And while law enforcement say they're committed to keeping the peace, history reminds us political conventions in this city can be a recipe for chaos. In tonight's Eye on America, CBS's Mark Strassman speaks with some veterans of the 1968 protests about what they hope to see this convention week.
mayhem on Michigan Avenue. Outside the 1968 Democratic National Convention, Mayor Richard Daley's police thumped protesters in downtown Chicago.
They jabbed nightsticks into stomachs and skulls.
We were demonstrating, and it was basically an attack.
You can see Michael James, now 82, in this famous photograph. Protesters surrounding a police van.
The myth has persisted over the years that we tipped it over. We did not. We rocked it.
Was it scary?
Terrifying.
In 1968, Bill Ayers was a leader in Students for a Democratic Society, or SDS.
They beat me up right there, took me to Cook County Jail, and I was there overnight.
56 years later, no one is expecting that level of volatility or violence at this year's convention. But here's what's striking: the connection between yesterday's protesters and today's.
We learned a lot from them, the way that they protest and the way that they take the streets.
Celia Nims, 26, is an organizer in the new SDS. We invited her and Ayers, now 79, for a talk about protest movements then and now.
Can you imagine trying to organize these demonstrations without cell phones, without social media?
Different generation, different time, different technology for sure.
It's a different generation, but I think the moral energy is very similar. I'm looking uneasily at the world, as we all should, and then we should do something about it.
Their targets in both eras, Democrats, the party in power at the White House. And the driving issue, again, a war. In 1968, Vietnam. In 2024, Gaza.
What are some of the similarities, would you say, between then and now?
We're anti-war, we're anti-intervention, we're opposed to U.S. violence.
And we have the huge outpouring of women's rights, people refusing to go back into the closet. And the themes that we were fighting about 60 years ago are still true.
Chicago police have trained on de-escalation tactics for a year to prepare for this convention.
We're planning to have a family-friendly protest.
Neither one of you is anticipating a repeat of the mayhem.
We don't want a police riot, but that doesn't mean it won't happen.
Michael James these days is an author, a photographer, but a protester emeritus.
I'm going to leave it to others to raise criticisms of the Democratic Party.
Bill Ayers and his wife, Bernadine Dorn, spent 11 years on the run, wanted in connection with a series of bombings of public buildings. She eventually pleaded guilty to misdemeanor charges. Like Celia Nims, Ayers says he's demonstrating in Chicago this week.
If you're not angry, you're not paying attention. But if you're only angry, you won't get to where we need to go. Only love and generosity will do that.
This week, Chicago reconnects with America's partisan divide, then and now. For Eye on America, I'm Mark Strassman in Chicago.
Up next, we remember the life and career of Phil Donahue, who paved the way for generations of daytime talk show hosts. That's next. Tributes are pouring in tonight following the death of daytime talk show host Phil Donahue, who was a pioneer in the industry by making his audience part of the show. Audiences were drawn to Phil Donahue's folksy style. Riveted by his interviews with the famous,
I never thought about it that way,
and the infamous.
Your ne'er-do-wells.
Crowned the king of daytime talk, Donahue was the first to make audiences part of the show.
Are you married?
Well,
I got a girl for you.
No.
Allowing them to ask questions. The Phil Donahue Show made its debut in 1967 in Dayton, Ohio, the start of a 29-year run tackling a range of topics. His show's pioneering format paved the way for scores of daytime hosts, including Oprah Winfrey, who posted today on social media, "There wouldn't have been an Oprah show without Phil Donahue." In May, Donahue received the Presidential Medal of Freedom. His wife of 44 years, actress Marlo Thomas, shared this heartfelt message, writing, "As a man who spent his career loving his audiences, Phil got such a kick out of our cozy little community here." Phil Donahue was 88 years old, and that is tonight's CBS Evening News. Our special coverage of the Democratic National Convention continues next here on CBS. I'm Norah O'Donnell in Chicago. We'll see you in just a moment.